The moon was full that night. The wind tore through the woods, creating an ominous sound that would send chills down his back. He walked alone that night. There was a thick layer of snow on the ground, but for the first time in weeks, the storm had died down. The sound of his feet trudging through the snow was silenced by the roar of the wind. The tall pines stood strong in the face of the wind. The staggered, unpredictable pattern of the trees would be hard to navigate. Well, for anyone else it would. It had to be tonight. There would be no second chance for him. It had been weeks since his last meal. The clouds forming meant there would be more snow coming soon. No food tonight would certainly mean his demise. The dimly lit woods from the glow of the moon would offer him great cover for his hunt. He knew the land well, being that it was his birthplace. His family had lived in these woods for centuries, settling from place to place following the food source. The family's game of choice was elk, but being alone, that would be near impossible. Tonight, he searched for something smaller. A deer, possibly even a rabbit would suffice. He simply needed something to tide him over until the weather conditions improved. He yearned to be with his family. They were separated weeks ago. The family was out on a hunt. They had been tracking a bull elk when suddenly they were attacked by an unknown creature. It stood tall, it was fast, and it was smart. To make matters worse, there were a few of them. Instincts kicked in as they ran, as fast as their feet could carry them. Knowing the land well, he directed his family to take a turn around the river bend. He would turn the other way, leaving an obvious trail for the creatures to follow. They followed him for what seemed like an eternity. They made unfamiliar sounds and moved in ways that he had never seen. He had hunted all his life, but never before had he been the hunted. After carefully evading the creatures for what seemed like days, using his knowledge of his homeland to outmaneuver them, he settled into a cave that he had used many times throughout his life. That was when the first of many snowstorms hit. He was stuck in that cave. Even for a seasoned woodsman like himself, attempting to traverse these conditions would mean certain death. He could only think of his family, his beautiful wife, son, and daughter. He knew they would be safe. His wife was every bit as cunning as he was. She knew every stick and tree in this land. His children were young. They were fierce like their father, and smart like their mother. This did not stop him from worrying, though. His heart ached to see their faces again. He wanted to know for sure that they had not been found. Although he could not stop thinking about his family, he needed food. Without that, he would surely die and never see them again. Emerging from the cave, he stepped through the silent woods. The winds had let up, allowing him to hear any possible game in the area. Moving quietly through the trees, he patiently stalked the night, seeking his next catch. The sound of a twig snapping broke through the woods. A smirk ran across his face. It was time to be the hunter again. He lowered himself down as not to be seen. He carefully moved through the woods, picking up the trail. He found the prints. After a brief examination, he knew what his prey was. A deer. By the looks of the print, a relatively small one, probably only a year into adulthood, but nevertheless, it was food. He preferred bigger game. It offered more of a challenge. But this was no time to be picky. The clouds above were growing thicker and the winds were turning. He only had a few hours before the snowfall would come. He needed to bag his prize and return to the cave. Not long after being on the trail, he found the twig that had been broken. He was close. Moving ever more careful, each step as careful as a mother handling her newborn, he trekked on. There it was, his prize, a young adult buck, just as he had thought. He began to quicken his pace. He needed to get upwind of the buck so that it would not pick up on his scent. After carefully moving upwind and tracking the movement of the buck, he positioned himself. He had only one shot at this. He had grown weak from hunger. Missing this chance would be fatal. The deer moved closer, stopping to shovel snow and graze from time to time, unknowingly walking closer to its predator. Now! He sprang forward, leaping towards his prey. sinking his teeth into the throat of the buck. The warm blood of his kill spilled out onto his fangs, soaking into his fur. He held tight. The buck thrashed and violently tried to throw him off. But alas, it took its final breath. He released it for a moment to mourn and be thankful for the land that had given him a meal. He was always grateful after a hunt, for another gave its life so that he may live. After a moment, he began the tough journey back to the cave, dragging the deer along with him. It was not safe to eat out in the open. You never know who could be watching. When the sound caught his ear again, that unfamiliar sound of those creatures he escaped weeks ago, they were back, and they were close. He quickly moved to the base of a tree, burrowing out some snow to stash his catch. The sounds grew closer. Their steps were clumsy and loud. The creatures' noises grew. He began to dart from tree to tree, staying out of their path. He ducked under a bush, with the snow helping cover him. He hoped they would move past. The steps grew louder and louder as they walked in front of the bush. He got his first real look at the mysterious beings. They stood on two legs, with their two front legs at their sides, covered in a thick fur. It was unlike any fur he had ever seen before. It was colored to match the trees. Each one of them carried a long stick in their hands. As they passed, he noticed that one had a pelt on him, the skin of a deer. It sickened him. Carrying the skin of your prey was a display of savagery he had not ever seen. After the beings had passed, he went back to his kill. It had become stiff due to the cold. He hated his food cold, but beggars can't be choosers. He was close to the cave when the snow began to fall. He quickened his pace. The wind was harsh and the snow fell heavy. After battling the storm, he made it to his temporary home. He dragged the deer deep into the cave, wanting to get away from the elements and as far away from those things as he could. Deep in the cave, he heard a sound that he recognized. As 3 sets of paws came scampering up the cave trail, he was greeted by the howls and licks of his family, as his wife knew to find him here. After all, she was the brains of the family. His heart was full of joy and relief as they cuddled close together. He was complete once again. The family was whole. They knew not how long the storm would last or if those beings would still be there, but they did not care. All that mattered was that they were together.